I was born and raised in Switzerland, a country known for cheese, mountains, tax evasion, but we don't talk about this here. And of course, the Swiss Army knife. Now, this is a Swiss Army knife that was given to me at the start of basic training in the Swiss Armed Forces. So it is an actual Swiss Army knife. It has 4 tools which collectively serve 7 functions, like cutting or opening a bottle. And it represents the future of impact investing, philanthropy, and development finance. Now, why that is, I'll tell you in a minute. But first, let's look at what the present of these fields look like using the American food system as an example. Here's a visual depiction of the American food system today. It is characterized by industrial meat production, mechanized monocropping, and ultra-processed foods. And as such, it contributes to climate change, soil degradation, and obesity. And here's an AI's vision of a sustainable, healthy, and equitable food system. This looks and feels very differently. Now, many impact investors might subscribe to this vision that we need a deep and structural change to the way we grow, process, consume, and dispose of food. But many are actually ill-positioned to catalyze this kind of change. And that's because they operate from the perspective of a single type of money. For many of you in the audience today, that's either market rate investment capital, concessional capital, or grants. For those working in corporations, it's balance sheet investments or supply chain finance. And for those working in government, it's public procurement and subsidies. When we look at a system through the narrow lens of a particular capital type, we tend to see only individual nodes. Venture investors tend to see startups in precision agriculture or alternative proteins. Infrastructure investors tend to see food processing facilities and agri-PV plants. Infrastructure or real estate investors tend to see farmland and green buildings. Carbon market specialists see biochar projects, and foundations see community art center and consumer awareness campaigns. Looking through a system through a narrow lens lets us see some of the nodes, but only those nodes that are shaped by that particular lens. It makes us miss all the other nodes, the connections between those nodes, the leverage points, and the emerging property of the system at large. To see the full system, we need a systems lens. The components of this lens are provided by systems thinking, systems innovation, and complex system science. And if we use it, we will bring to the surface the entire complexity of a system and uncover its secrets. Here's an example from our prototype around regenerative agriculture in the American Midwest. What you're looking at is what we call a transitions map. It is a cross between a causal loop diagram and the theory of change with a problem layer, a solution layer, and an actor layer. It shows us all the nodes in that system and their relationships, and it lets us understand the system's financing needs. And based on those insights, we can develop a capital deployment strategy capable of moving the system from its current extractive status quo to a regenerative future. Importantly, the map also led us to some surprising findings. It turns out that for this system to transform itself, it does not come down so much to new technologies on, say, precision agriculture or new food products, which is where most of the energy and impact investing currently is. Instead, this system needs capacity building for farmers. It needs insurance companies to change their underwriting practices. It needs more food processing facilities in the middle of the supply chain. And it needs an effort to build the market for regenerative products through advanced market commitments from corporations. So what's important is that these solutions aren't just a collection of isolated innovations, but that they come together in an integrated portfolio designed for specific places and supply chains. Because in some sense, all systems are local. Adopting a system lens means that we'll see more. But seeing more isn't where it stops. If we really want to change system, we also need to change the practice of capital deployment, which brings me back to the Swiss Army knife. But to grasp the relevance of the knife, we first need to understand that systems change is rarely the result of a single technology, single social enterprise, or single piece of physical infrastructure. It most often results as the combined effects of many interrelated shifts happening in a system at once and with a degree of shared directionality. Meaning, if we want to change systems, we have to intervene at different nodes of that system at the same time. And the interventions that need to happen across technology, business models, policy, social norms and values, narratives, etc., tend to have their own funding needs. Some are perfectly investable with market rate investment capital or concessional capital. Some require grants. Some require risk transfer mechanisms like new insurance products or advanced market commitments. And most of them benefit from a change in the tax code or in subsidy schemes. So the essence of systemic investing, of funding systems change, boils down to creating what we call an investment architecture that spans multiple capital types and is steeped in the system's actual financing needs, and then matching the right kind of capital to the right interventions at the right moment in time. In other words, knowing which tool of your army knife to use for which problem at which moment in time. And this is not at all how impact investing works today, because all too often we start with our capabilities and the kind of money we have access to. So if I'm a venture investor with access to venture capital, I'm going to start a new venture capital fund, whether or not the system I'm trying to change actually needs more VC. So moving from a systems optimization to a systems transformation objective has profound implications for the practice of purpose-driven capital deployment. It requires that we build strategic portfolios, not just thematic ones, and that we try to bring the assets, the investees and grantees in that portfolio into synergistic alignment with each other so that we can generate combinatorial effects. It also requires that we rethink how we design investment and funding vehicles around governance, incentive structures, terms, etc. It asks us that we build funder and investor coalitions across the public, private, and philanthropic sectors, not just on a deal-by-deal basis, like in blended finance, but in long-term strategic coalitions, ideally orchestrated by financial backbones that generate the systemic intelligence, do the convening, and orchestrate the capital flows. The investment portfolios that emerge should ideally be nested within a broader systems intervention approach that seeks alignment with NGOs, research institutions, community organizations, or other actors that investors typically don't collaborate with. And finally, we need to also rethink the way we make sense of impact, moving from output metrics at the level of individual companies or social enterprises to systems health at large. Enter some of the pioneers of this way of working. In their ocean strategy, Builder's Vision is working across the entire capital spectrum, deploying grants, catalytic capital, and market rate investment capital into startups, established companies, research institutions, and NGOs to build the future elements of the blue economy. The Think family has taken a similar multi-capital approach to addressing food waste in the United States. And the Groundbreak Coalition in Minneapolis and St. Paul's uses a mix of concessional loans, guarantees, and grants to close the racial wealth gap through helping Black people become homeowners and entrepreneurs. As examples of systemic investing, these efforts are pioneering, but they're still in their infancies. So the collective mission we're looking at here is to build the infrastructure of systemic investing so that systemic investing can become the new paradigm at the heart of impact investing, philanthropy, and development finance. That means doing the research to develop methods, tools, and frameworks, running more and bigger prototypes to understand what systemic investing could look like in practice, and then building the field through convenings, through education, and through storytelling. And not just in the food system, in climate change, in biodiversity, around mental illness, homelessness, any other social and environmental issue that is fundamentally systemic and complex in nature. Now, I'm going to close with an anecdote, a quote from an impact investor that I recently spoke to. He said, "It's very likely that our portfolio will be vastly impactful, but that the system we care about will still deteriorate." And this captures well what's going on at the moment in impact investing. We all have impressive success stories to tell, but 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries are being breached. And planetary boundaries are system-level KPIs. And 83% of SDGs are not on track. So arguably what we're doing is we're creating islands of sustainability in a sea of the polar crisis. What gives me hope is that we essentially have all the solutions we need to build the future we want. And many of them are represented here in the room or at the conference at large by the innovators and entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs who are in the audience. But the key question is, how will it all come together? Because if you want to see systems change, it's not just enough to build the individual pieces of the puzzle. It also has to ladder up. In other words, we have to learn how to not only spin the threads, but also weave the cloth. And in order to do such weaving, we need to put on a systems lens, and we need to take a Swiss Army knife approach to capital deployment. In other words, we all have to evolve into systemic investors.